Greetings, lore masters. Tonight, our chronicle covers a list of destinations that dwell in the darker corners of our memories, not necessarily because they are terrifying, though many are, but because they are exhausting. These are the places that test our patience, the ruins we groan at when the quest marker points their way, the caverns we wish we could skip. We are returning to the frozen north, to the province of Skyrim, to discuss the dungeons you should never enter twice. Tonight, we walk the halls of the most annoying locations in the game. You know the smell of these places, ancient dust, dried blood, and the lingering scent of frustration. Let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive a trip to Cold Harbour without some serious enchanted gear, or at least a very generous save file, so perhaps it is best we just talk about it from the safety of your bed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The wind howls down from the throat of the world, biting through fur armour and iron plating alike, carrying with it the scent of pine and looming snow. We begin our trek not in some obscure hidden valley, but on the well-trodden path leading out of the sleepy hamlet of Riverwood. It is a path every Dragonborn knows by heart, a muscle memory etched into the thumbs of millions. The destination is Bleak Falls Barrow. To the uninitiated, it is a majestic ruin, a soaring arch of grey stone dominating the skyline, promising adventure and ancient Nord secrets. To the veteran, however, it is the first hurdle, the mandatory chore, the golden claw grind that stands between the player and the true freedom of the open world. It is the dungeon you must clear to advance the main quest, to unlock dragons, to prove you aren't just some wandering vagrant. And because it is the first, it is the one we have seen the most. The journey up the mountain is deceptive. It starts with a gentle slope, perhaps a wolf or two to test your steel, before you reach the inevitable bandit tower. The archers are always there, waiting in the cold, their aim terrible, their dialogue repetitive. You climb the spiral stone stairs, clear the refuse, and step out onto the snowy ridge where the blizzard always seems to pick up intensity. The ruin looms ahead, massive and imposing, huge statues weeping stone tears into the snowdrifts. It is beautiful, in a desolate way, but the beauty fades when you realise you have to go inside and solve the same puzzles you solved 5 years ago, 10 years ago, yesterday on a failed permadeath run. Stepping through the heavy iron doors, the air changes, the wind dies, replaced by the heavy, stagnant silence of the crypt. The first room is always the same, a dead skeever, a few bandits discussing the very item you have come to retrieve, and the warm glow of a campfire that feels out of place in such a tomb. You listen to their conversation, something about a golden claw and how the owner, Lucan Valerius, won't miss it. The irony, of course, is that Lucan Valerius definitely misses it, enough to send a total stranger into a draugr-infested hole to get it back. The bandits fall easily, their leather armour offering no protection against the destiny of the protagonist. And then you are faced with the first indignity of Bleak Falls Barrow, the pillar puzzle. It is a mechanism designed not to test intelligence, but simply to check if you have eyes. Snake, snake, whale. The answer is carved into the very rocks above the pillars, one of which has conveniently fallen to the floor to make sure you can't possibly miss it. You pull the lever, the gate rises, and you descend, deeper into the earth. The spirals of the barrow are designed to feel claustrophobic, the stone walls pressing in, draped in thick grey cobwebs that part with a sticky, tearing sound as you push through. This is where the local wildlife changes. The bandits give way to the frostbite spiders, creatures that trigger a primal revulsion even through a screen. Then comes the frantic scuttling of the giant wounded frostbite spider, dropping from the ceiling with a hiss. It's a scripted encounter, a moment meant to terrify new players, but for the returning adventurer it's just an obstacle to chop through to get to Arvel the Swift. Ah, Arvel. Is there a more aptly named, yet utterly disappointing NPC in the province? He hangs there in the webs, begging for release, promising to share the treasure. Every player knows the script. You cut him down, and he instantly betrays you, running deeper into the dungeon with the golden claw in his inventory. His swiftness usually carries him right into a trap or a waking draugr. This brings us to a point of contention that fans have debated since the game's release. Is Vale the swift an idiot, or just panicked? The lore suggests he knew the claw was a key, yet he runs blindly into a room filled with pressure plates and sleeping undead. Some argue the dungeon's design drove him mad. Others simply believe he represents the chaotic greed of thieves who underestimate the ancient Nords. Regardless of his motivation, chasing him down is a chore. You loot his body, retrieve the claw, a heavy golden object etched with strange motifs, and press on. The crypt opens up now. The air grows colder, if that were possible. This is the domain of the draugr. They slumber in the wall niches, dried husks of ancient Nords bound to serve the dragon cult even in death. You know exactly which ones will wake up. The eyes ignite with a pale blue witchlight. The groan of withered vocal cords echoes through the chamber, and the slow, shambling unsheathing of ancient Nord weapons begins. The combat here is rhythm and repetition. Block, strike, shout. If you have one yet, which you usually don't. It is a grind in the truest sense. You are clearing room after room of these desiccated warriors, dodging swinging spike walls that are painfully easy to spot, all to reach the Hall of Stories. The Hall of Stories is where the Golden Claw finally finds its purpose. The massive door stands before you, 3 rings of animals carved into its face, a bear, a moth, and an owl. This leads us to one of the most persistent community debates regarding Skyrim's dungeon design. Why are the puzzles so simple? The solution is on the palm of the claw itself. All you have to do is look at the item in your inventory. Many lore enthusiasts posit a fascinating theory here. These doors were not built to keep people out, but to keep the draugr in. The dragon cult wanted to ensure that only a living being with higher cognitive function, someone who could possess the claw and read the symbols, could open the seal. The mindless undead, lacking the ability to reason or manipulate the rings, would remain trapped inside, protecting the secrets of the dragon priest and the word wall. It's a compelling idea that turns a simplistic game mechanic into a piece of brilliant world building, suggesting the Nords feared their own dead more than they feared grave robbers. The door grinds open, rotating into the floor with a rumble that shakes dust from the ceiling. Beyond lies the sanctum. It is a massive cavern, lit by the ethereal glow of mushrooms and light filtering in from cracks in the mountain far above. A waterfall cascades into the depths, adding a constant roar to the soundscape, and there, curving around the central dais, is the word wall. The chanting begins, a low masculine choir rising in intensity, the voices of the ancient tongues calling to the dragon blood in your veins. You approach the wall, the screen darkens, and the word fus, force, burns itself into your mind. But the dungeon isn't done with you yet. The coffin on the dais bursts open. Depending on your level, a draugr overlord or perhaps something worse steps out. He carries the dragon stone, a heavy slate map of dragon burial sites. This is the core in-game fact that drives the early narrative. The Dragonstone is not just a rock, it is a map of the resurrection. Farengar's secret fire in Whiterun needs it to track the return of the World Eater's kin, but in the moment, it's just another heavy item adding 25 points of weight to your already overburdened inventory. You defeat the Overlord, loot the chest, finding the usual assortment of minor gold and a generic enchanted weapon, and look for the exit. Thankfully, the designers included a shortcut. A lever opens a hidden stone door, leading you out onto a high ledge overlooking the valley. The fresh air hits you, the sun might be setting or rising, casting long shadows over Lake Ilinalta. You have done it. You have cleared Bleak Falls Barrow. Again. The sense of accomplishment is muted, replaced by the relief that you don't have to come back here for another playthrough. You fast travel or slide down the mountain, hand the claw back to Lucan, who puts it right back on the counter where it can be stolen again, and take the stone to Whiterun. It is the quintessential Skyrim experience. Atmospheric, iconic, and utterly exhausting after the first dozen times. But the Golden Claw grind is just the beginning. The province is littered with places that demand more time, more patience, and more sanity than a simple barrow. As we leave the Riverwood Trader behind, we look to the marshes of Hjalmarch, where a horn, a note, and a headache await. The Greybeards have summoned us, but they haven't made the testing ground easy. The journey from Whiterun to the swamps of Hjalmarch is a transition from golden tundra to oppressive grey mist. The air grows thick and humid, smelling of stagnant water and rotting vegetation. We are heading to Ustengrav. The Greybeards, those masters of the voice who sit in meditation atop the highest peak in Tamriel, have given the Dragonborn a task. It is the trial of Jurgen Windcaller. To prove you are truly Dragonborn, you must retrieve the horn of their founder from his tomb. It sounds straightforward, a classic fetch quest structure. But Ustengrav is designed to test more than just your combat prowess. It tests your ability to navigate gloom, disappointment, and the mocking laughter of a plot twist. Ustengrav sits deep within the marsh, a dark scar in the earth surrounded by the twisted roots of dead trees and the mournful calls of unseen birds. As you approach the entrance, you might encounter bandit necromancers or mudcrabs fighting for dominance in the muck, a prelude to the unholy alliance of magic and decay waiting inside. You descend into the ruin, the stone steps slick with moisture. Unlike the dry, dusty air of Bleak Falls Barrow, Ustengrav feels wet. The sound of dripping water is constant, echoing through the vast hollow chambers. The interior architecture is distinct. It's ancient Nord, yes, but expansive. The main chamber opens up into a massive underground cavern, overgrown with trees and vegetation that have never seen the sun. This is one of the few dungeons in Skyrim where you get a sense of an ecosystem thriving in the dark, but the beauty is offset by the sheer verticality of the place. You are constantly looking down into abysses or up at bridges you need to reach. The path winds through the darkness, populated by draugr who seem particularly agitated here, perhaps disturbed by the dampness seeping into their bones. You fight your way down, the enemies scaling with your level. At lower levels, it is draugr and skeletons. At higher levels, the dreaded draugr deathlords shout you across the room with unrelenting force, a taste of your own medicine. But the combat is not the primary annoyance of Ustengrav. It is the navigation. The layout loops and turns, forcing you to descend deep into the earth only to climb back up. And then you reach the puzzle. The puzzle of Ustengrav is infamous not for its difficulty, but for its execution. 3 stones stand in a row, facing 3 gates. As you approach a stone, it glows and its corresponding gate opens, but move away and the gate slams shut. To pass, you must sprint past all 3 stones in rapid succession and use the whirlwind sprint shout, the very shout the Greybeards just taught you, to blast through the gates before they close. It sounds simple on paper. In practice, it is a clumsy dance of timing. You run, the stones light up, you shout, and you slam face first into the 3rd gate, which closed a millisecond too early. You try again. You clip the edge of a rock. You run out of stamina. You wait for the shout cooldown to reset, standing there in the dark, staring at the metal bars, contemplating the life choices that led you to be a shouting mailman for a group of monks. Once you finally clear the gates, you enter the depths where the floor is not stone but fire. A hallway of flame traps awaits, requiring careful timing or a reckless sprint with healing spells ready in both hands. The spiders return here, larger and more aggressive, dropping from the high ceilings of the final sanctuary. The atmosphere is tense. You are approaching the resting place of Jurgen Windcaller, the most powerful tongue of the First Era. You expect a boss fight, a guardian, a spectral test of strength. You reach the final chamber. The dais rises from the water, majestic and solemn. A single stone coffin rests in the centre. You approach, ready to claim the horn of Jurgen Windcaller. You activate the coffin and nothing. The horn is gone. In its place rests a piece of paper. A note from a friend. This is the core in-game fact that defines the Ustengrav experience. You don't actually get the horn here. After trudging through the swamp, navigating the cavernous depths, solving the gate puzzle and dodging fire traps, your reward is a sarcastic sticky note. I need to speak to you, urgently. Rent the attic room at the Sleeping Giant Inn in Riverwood, and I'll meet you. It is the ultimate anticlimax. The game has pulled the rug out from under you. You're not the hero claiming the artifact, you're the slowpoke who arrived late to the party. The note is signed simply a friend, but seasoned players know this is Delphine, the innkeeper who is secretly a member of the Blades. This twist leads to a fascinating bit of obscure lore concerning the timeline. How did Delphine get here first? She doesn't use the voice. She couldn't have whirlwind sprinted through the gates. Did she pick the locks? Did she climb over the walls? Or, as some darker theories suggest, Did she simply brute force her way through using ancient Akaviri techniques lost to history? The game never explains how a middle-aged innkeeper bypassed a puzzle specifically designed for a Dragonborn. It implies that the Greybeard's test is perhaps not as exclusive as they claim, or that Delphine is significantly more terrifying than she appears. There is also a fan theory that suggests the Greybeards knew the horn was gone. They are masters of the voice. They can speak to the sky and hear the whispers of the world. Would they not sense that the artifact of their founder had been moved? Some believe they sent you there knowing you would find the note, because the true test was not retrieving the horn, but encountering the blades. They needed to set the Dragonborn on the path of destiny, and that path required meeting Delphine. The dungeon was just the waiting room for the real plot to begin, so you stand there in the empty tomb, holding a piece of paper, the water lapping at your boots. You have to backtrack. There is a shortcut, thankfully, a door behind the coffin leading back to the entrance, but the walk out of Ustengrav feels heavier than the walk in. You haven't accomplished the quest. You've merely been given a redirect. You emerge back into the swamp, the mist just as oppressive as before. You have to fast travel back to Riverwood, rent a room, and listen to Delphine explain her paranoia before she finally hands over the horn. Then, and only then, can you return to High Hrothgar to officially complete the quest. It is a dungeon run that results in a fetch quest for a fetch quest. It is a masterpiece of narrative misdirection, but in terms of gameplay satisfaction, it ranks high on the list of annoyances. The note from a friend is perhaps the most hated item in a Dragonborn's inventory, a symbol of wasted time and damp boots. But if the swamps of Yarmarch are damp and disappointing, our next destination is cold and maddeningly deep. We must travel far to the north, into the glaciers of the Winterhold region. We're going on an expedition, one that starts with scientific curiosity and ends in a descent into madness. Pack your warmest furs and prepare for the grinding gears of the Dwemer. We're heading to Alftand. The wind in Winterhold doesn't just blow, it screams. It tears across the ice fields, blinding you with whiteout conditions as you trudge toward the marker on your compass. We're heading to Alftand, a name that strikes a specific chord of dread in veteran players. It is one of the primary entry points to the subterranean world of Blackreach, but before you can even think about the glowing mushrooms below, you must survive the frozen horror above. Alftand is not just a dungeon, it is a crime scene, a tragedy frozen in time, and an endurance test that seems to stretch on forever. The exterior of Alftand is a cluster of brass towers jutting out of the glacier, half buried in centuries of snow. You enter through a wooden structure, a makeshift camp built by an expedition team. This is the first clue that things have gone wrong. The journal of Sulla Trebatius lies on a table, detailing his obsession with finding Dwemer secrets. He dragged a team of researchers and mercenaries out here, convinced fame and fortune awaited. As you descend the glacial crevasse into the ruins proper, you begin to find the bodies. Alftand is unique because it tells a coherent linear story through environmental storytelling as you progress. You aren't just fighting anonymous monsters, you're retracing the steps of a doomed party. You find the Khajiit Jadar, driven mad by skooma withdrawal and paranoia, attacking you on sight because he thinks you're trying to steal his supply. He's huddled over the body of his brother Jajar, whom he likely killed in a fit of delusion. It's a dark, gritty encounter that sets the tone. This place breaks minds. The architecture here is the classic Dwemer style. Brass pipes, stone faces, steam venting from the walls, but it is corrupted by the ice. The glacier has breached the hull of the city. You walk through corridors where the wall is half metal, half sheer blue ice. The contrast is beautiful, but the navigation is a nightmare. The animonculi, the Dwemer robots, are active. Spider workers leap at you with electrical sparks. Spheres roll out of tubes to blade you into submission. The clanking of their metal feet on the grating is the soundtrack of your descent. But the true annoyance of Alftand is its length. It just keeps going. You clear the glacial ruins thinking you've reached the bottom, only to find the door to the animonculary. This is where the verticality becomes dizzying. You're on narrow walkways suspended over a seemingly bottomless pit. One misstep, one shout from a draugr, or a push from a Faelmer, and you fall to your death. And yes, the Faelmer are here. As you go deeper, the robots give way to the twisted, blind elves. They infest the lower levels, their chitin tents clustered in the grand halls of the dwarves. The story of the expedition concludes in the Alftand Cathedral. This is the final zone, and it hosts a grim standoff. You walk in to see two figures, Sulla Trebatius, the leader, and Umana, the female Redguard bodyguard. They are the only survivors. They stand over the defeated centurion, battered and bloody, and they are arguing. Paranoia has taken them completely. When they see you, they don't see a rescuer. They see competition. "It's mine! I found it!" Sulla screams. They attack you, and you are forced to kill the very people you might have hoped to save. It is a bleak ending to a long, arduous journey. There is an obscure lore tidbit hidden in Umana's inventory. She carries the Targ of the Blooded, a unique shield with spikes that cause bleeding damage. It's a powerful early-game item, but its presence raises questions. The shield isn't Dwemer, it's seemingly of her own making or a family heirloom. It speaks to her role as the protector, the one who bashed her way through hordes of Falmer to keep Sulla safe, only to be betrayed by his greed. It adds a layer of tragedy to the fight. You aren't fighting a villain, you're fighting a broken hero. This section also touches on a core in-game fact, the Elder Scroll. You're likely here for the quest Discerning the Transmundane for Septimus Cygnus, or the main quest Elder Knowledge. At the end of the cathedral lies the Great Lift of Alftand, a mechanism that can take you back to the surface. Unlocking this gate is a moment of pure euphoria. It means you never have to walk through the icy ruins again. You can just take the elevator down next time, but wait, you aren't taking the elevator up. You're going down. Beyond the cathedral lies the mechanism to the deeper world. You insert the attunement sphere, the floor sections retract, and a dark, spiralling staircase is revealed. The air coming up from below is different, humid, smelling of ozone and strange fungi. This is the gateway to Blackreach. The community has long debated the nature of the Dwemer disappearance, and Alftand is often cited in these discussions. The condition of the ruin suggests the Falmer were pushing up before the expedition arrived. The battle lines were drawn. Some fans theorise that the Dwemer didn't just vanish. They were losing a war of attrition against their former slaves, and their disappearance was a desperate tactical retreat into another plane of existence, leaving their automated defences to hold the line. Alftand feels like a fortress that fell from the inside out. But as you stand at the threshold of the spiral stair, looking down into the purple gloom, the tragedy of Sulla and Umana fades. A new anxiety takes hold. You know what comes next. You know the vastness that awaits. Alftand was the appetizer, the long, frozen corridor leading to the main hall. You take a breath, check your potion supply, and step into the stairs. The loading screen appears and the title card fades in. We are leaving the world of men and snow behind. We are entering the world beneath the world, a place of beauty, silence, and the most annoying collection quest in the history of role-playing. Games. The brass gates open and the crimson glow greets you. Welcome to Blackreach. The screen fades from black, and your eyes adjust to a new palette. Deep bioluminescent blues, glowing teals, and the oppressive heavy shadows of the Earth's crust. You have arrived in Blackreach. It is less a dungeon and more an underground continent, a sprawling cavern so massive it has its own weather system. Giant glowing mushrooms the size of towers dominate the landscape, their caps shedding spores that drift like snow in the stagnant air. In the distance, an artificial sun, a massive glowing orb hanging from the cavern ceiling, bathes the silent city in an eerie golden light. It is undeniably beautiful. The first time you step out onto the balcony overlooking the silent city, it is a moment of awe. But that awe quickly curdles into frustration as you realise the sheer scale of what you have to navigate. Blackreach is the hub that connects three major Dwemer cities, Alftand, Mzinchaleft, and Raldbthar. It is a massive, confusing web of causeways, towers, and open fields patrolled by the most eclectic mix of enemies in the game. You have Falmer skulking in the shadows, their chorus pets clicking and skittering across the stone. You have Dwemer centurions, massive steam-powered guardians that have stood watch for thousands of years, and then surprisingly you have giants. The presence of giants in Blackreach is a core in-game fact that always catches players off guard. Why are they here? How did they get down here? Seeing a mammoth plodding through the glowing fungi is a surreal experience. They wander the roads of the lost dwarves seemingly at peace, adding a layer of strange tranquility to the otherwise hostile environment. But you don't have time to ponder the migration patterns of subterranean megafauna. You have a job to do. You're likely here for the Elder Scroll stored in the Tower of Mzark. But before you go there, a sound catches your ear. A high-pitched, ringing chime. You look around and see it. A crimson nirnroot. It looks just like the standard nirnroot found on the surface, but it glows with a blood-red light. You pick it, and a quest update flashes on your screen. A return to your roots. Collect 30 crimson nirnroots. This is the moment the soul leaves the body. The map of Blackreach is useless. It is a nebulous blob of fog that fails to account for the verticality, the hidden paths, or the sheer size of the cavern. You're now tasked with finding 30 small, noisy plants, scattered across a dark, dangerous landscape filled with enemies that can one-shot you. There are no quest markers for the individual routes. You have to hunt them by sound and sight. This quest is widely considered one of the most tedious in Skyrim. You find yourself running in circles, checking behind every pipe and under every mushroom, the constant chiming sound driving you slowly toward madness. There is a sinister brilliance to the Crimson Nirnroot quest. It forces you to explore every inch of Blackreach, to see the details you would otherwise sprint past. You find the small pumping stations, the debate halls, the sleeping quarters of a vanished race. You find the slaves' quarters, a grim reminder of the Faermer's origins. The lore tells us the Dwemer blinded the snow elves and forced them into servitude here. Blackreach was not just a city, it was a plantation, and the Faermer were the livestock. Deep in the centre of the silent city, there hangs the great glowing orb, the artificial sun. Most players glance at it and move on, but there is an obscure lore tidbit, or rather a hidden mechanic associated with it. If you have the unrelenting force shout and you shout directly at the orb, something answers. The sound resonates, the orb shudders, and a dragon appears. Vyrthur, an ancient dragon, seemingly trapped or hiding beneath the earth, summoned by the voice. He flies around the cavern, breathing fire on the giant mushrooms, a hidden boss fight that offers no unique loot but massive bragging. Rights. Why is a dragon down here? Was he a prisoner of the Dwemer, a pet? Or did he flee the dragon war and burrow deep to escape Alduin's wrath? The game never says. He's just another secret in the dark. The fan community has spent years debating the purpose of Blackreach. Was it a transport hub, a farming facility, a military base? The tonal architecture theory suggests the entire cavern is a massive musical instrument. The pipes, the steam, the resonating sun. It was all designed to manipulate reality through sound, a concept the Dwemer were obsessed with. The Crimson Nirnroot, with its unique chiming, might be a biological reaction to this constant, subtle vibration of the earth. The plants are singing along with the machine. Navigating to the Tower of Mzark is the final leg of the journey. You fight through the Falmer servants, dodge the centurion guarding the bridge, and enter the tower. Inside, the aesthetic shifts from cavernous gloom to intricate golden machinery. The oculory is a massive astrolabe, a device for reading the Elder Scrolls. The puzzle here is a relief, a simple game of matching buttons until the lenses line. The machine descends, the crystal housing opens, and there it is, the Elder Scroll, Dragon. It floats in the air, radiating a power that distorts the vision. You grab it and the weight of destiny settles in your inventory. Literally, it weighs 20 units, and you can't remove it. You take the lift to the surface, emerging back into the snow of Skyrim, blinking in the sudden sunlight. The contrast is physical. You feel like you've been underwater for days. You vow never to return to Blackreach. You tell yourself you don't need the alchemy bonus from the Nirnroot quest. But deep down, you know the truth. On your next playthrough, when the main quest demands it, you will be back. You will hear the chime, you will see the glow, and you will hate every second of it. Blackreach is the ultimate endurance test, a dungeon that is too big, too empty, and too full of busywork. It is the centerpiece of Skyrim's underground, a marvel of design that players love to hate. But at least in Blackreach you can leave. There are lifts, there are exits. Our next destination offers no such luxury. We are heading east to the snowy peaks near Winterhold again, to a hole in the ground that promises nothing but gravity and regret. We're going to the sightless pit, and once you jump in, there is only one way out. Far to the east of Winterhold, amidst the howling snowdrifts that bury the landscape in eternal white, There is a hole in the ground. It is not a grand entrance like Bleak Falls Barrow, nor a sprawling camp like Alftand. It is simply a gaping maw in the ice, marked on your map as the Sightless Pit. The name itself is a warning. Most dungeons in Skyrim have doors. Doors can be opened, doors can be exited if the enemies prove too tough or your potion supply runs dry. The Sightless Pit has no door, it has a drop. You approach the edge, peering down into the darkness. The wind whistles over the opening, creating a hollow, mournful sound. Maybe you see the icy ledge below and think, I can make that. Maybe you slip. Or maybe, driven by the insatiable curiosity that kills more Dragonborns than dragons ever do, you just jump. The moment your boots hit the ice below, you realise your mistake. You look up. The hole is too high. You cannot climb back out. The only way is forward, deeper into the earth. You have just entered one of the most claustrophobic and punishing traps in the game. The initial area is deceptively quiet. It is an ice cave, glittering and beautiful, filled with the ambient sound of shifting glaciers. But as you advance, you discover the architecture of the ancient Falmer. This isn't the grand Dwemer stonework we saw in Alftand, nor the gnawed ruins of the Barrows. This is the primitive, chitinous construction of the Betrayed. Tents made of insect shell, fences of bone, and totem poles adorned with human skulls. You're in a hive. The Sightless Pit is annoying not because of its length. It is actually relatively short compared to Blackreach, but because of its intensity. It is a gauntlet. The enemies here are clustered in tight spaces. You turn a corner and are face to face with a Falmer warmonger, the elite of their caste, wearing heavy armour and wielding weapons poisoned with toxins that drain your health in seconds. In the narrow tunnels there is no room to kite, no room to manoeuvre. It is a brutal, close-quarters brawl in the dark. This dungeon serves as a prime example of a core in-game fact regarding the Falmer, their reliance on sound. The game mechanics allow you to sneak past them more easily than other enemies if you are quiet, as they are blind. However, in the Sightless Pit, the terrain works against you. The floor is often covered in bone chimes, strings of hollow bones that rattle loudly when brushed against. One wrong step, one clatter, and the entire hive wakes up. You see the red dots appear on your compass before you see the enemies. The clicking begins. The chore skitter out from the walls. As you fight your way down, you enter the Temple of Gzrib. This is the heart of the dungeon, a massive Dwemer ruin that the Falmer have claimed. The juxtaposition is striking. The clean, geometric lines of the dwarves covered in the chaotic, organic filth of the Falmer. It is here you find the tragedy of the pit. You aren't the first to fall in. You find the remains of other adventurers, their journals detailing the slow realization that they were trapped. One obscure lore tidbit found here is the specific clan of Falmer that inhabits this pit. They seem more organized, more militaristic. The Temple of Gzrib contains a massive lift, a piece of Dwemer technology that still functions. This implies the Falmer here have either learned to operate the machinery or have simply built their nest around it, worshipping the hum of the engines. The lift leads to the final challenge, a boss fight against a high-level Falmer and his pets. The battle is frantic. The room is large but filled with pillars and obstacles. The Falmer use invisibility potions, disappearing from sight only to strike from behind. The Chorus hunters, flying mosquito-like nightmares, buzz overhead, spitting poison. It is a chaotic mess of particle effects and health bar management. And throughout it all, the nagging thought persists. I just want to get out. The trap for the curious theory is a favourite among the community. Fans speculate that the Sightless Pit was designed by the developers specifically to punish players who explore without preparing. It is a gear check. If you fall in at a low level, you're essentially soft-locked. You cannot fast travel from indoors. You cannot climb out. Your only hope is to lower the difficulty or reload a save from hours ago. It is a cruel design choice that breaks the unspoken rule of open-world freedom. The ability to retreat. When you finally defeat the boss and activate the lift, the ride up feels like a resurrection. The gears grind, the cage ascends, and you watch the Falmer hive recede into the darkness. You emerge onto a high mountain ledge far from where you entered. The view is spectacular, the sea of ghosts stretching out to the horizon. But you don't linger. You check your map, realise you're miles from civilization and start the long trek. Down the mountain, swearing never to jump into a hole again without casting clairvoyance first. The Sightless Pit is a reminder that Skyrim is a dangerous place, not just because of monsters, but because of the world itself. Gravity is the ultimate boss. But while the pit is a vertical trap, our next destination is a horizontal nightmare. We are moving from the ice caves of Winterhold to the Rift, to a cave system that claims to be a simple bandit hideout, but reveals itself to be a sprawling multi-zone city of the dead. We are hunting for a single red stone in the endless depths of Tolvald's cave. The Rift is usually a pleasant hold, filled with golden aspen trees and autumnal light. But beneath the beauty lies rot. Tolvald's cave is located north of Riften, hidden in the crags. You are likely here for one reason: the crown of Baranziah. The quest. No stone unturned is the bane of completionists. 24 stones scattered across the world with no quest markers. You have finally consulted a wiki, found the location of one of the missing stones and travelled here to grab it. You expect a quick in and out. You are wrong. Tolvald's cave is not one dungeon, it is 3. It starts as a cave, transitions into Tolvald's Gap, and ends in Tolvald's Crossing. It keeps going, and going, and going. What begins as a fight against trolls and bears quickly descends into another former war zone. The sheer quantity of enemies in this dungeon is staggering. It feels like a spawn point, a breeding ground where the game dumps every extra failure it has in memory. You fight through the first zone thinking you're done. You find a door, loading screen. You enter the gap. More Falmer, more Chorus. You find the remains of a caravan, the ghostly echoes of the Dunmer refugees who died here fleeing Morrowind. This adds a layer of sadness to the grind. You're walking through a mass grave of elves who thought they had found safety, only to be butchered by their devolved cousins. Finally, after what feels like an hour of hacking and slashing, you reach the crossing. You find the stone. It sits innocuously on a shelf or a table, a small floating gem that looks like every other gem. You grab it. Stones of Baranziah, 2324. The satisfaction is fleeting. Now you have to walk back out. Or if you are lucky, you find the exit that dumps you out on the other side of the mountain completely disoriented. Tolvald's cave is the definition of dungeon fatigue. It lacks the unique mechanics of Blackreach or the narrative punch of Alftand. It is simply too long, too full of enemies, and too generic to be memorable for anything other than its annoyance. It is the dungeon you forget until you are inside it, and then the realization hits. Oh no, it's this one. But we are not done with the Falmer yet. Oh no, we have to go to the City of Stone, to the Reach, where the dwarves built a palace beneath the earth and left it to be infested by spiders. Our next stop is beneath the city of Markarth. Prepare your antidotes and your fear of heights. We are entering Ncharzel. We leave the humid depths of the Rift and travel west to the rocky, vertical landscape of the Reach. The city of Markarth is a fortress of stone, carved directly into the mountain by the Dwemer eons ago. It is a city of blood and silver, but beneath its streets lies something far older and far more dangerous. We are entering Ncharzel. Most players stumble into this nightmare during the quest for Calcelmo, the court wizard who is obsessed with Dwemer research. He asks you to kill a spider. Just a spider, he says. It's blocking my excavations. You agree, thinking it will be a 5-minute distraction. You enter the excavation site and there she is, Nimhe, a giant frostbite spider, a matriarch of her species descending from the ceiling of the entry hall. She is terrifying, yes, but she dies like any other beast. You loot her body, report back to Calcelmo, and get the key to the museum. Job done, right? Wrong. The death of Nimhe is just the unlocking mechanism, the real dungeon lies beyond her web. Ncharzel is a massive subterranean city that rivals Markarth itself in size. It is a cavernous void filled with towering brass structures, bridges that span dizzying heights, and a distinct lack of safety rails. The Dwemer apparently had no concept of OSHA regulations. The first thing you notice upon entering the main city chamber is the scale. It is enormous. You stand on a high balcony, looking down into the gloom where Falmer patrols are mere specks of light. The path forward is a spiral ramp that descends hundreds of feet. One slip, one shout from a dragur or a misjudged jump, and you fall. The fall is long enough that you have time to regret your decision, open your menu and realise you can't fast travel while falling before you hit the bottom. Ncharzel is structured as a central hub with several branching districts: the armory, the quarters, and the control room. To clear the dungeon, you often have to visit all of them to reactivate the automated defences. This is the core in-game fact of the area. You can turn the city back on. By fighting your way to the control lever, you can activate the Dwemer security system. Suddenly the lights flicker on, steam hisses from the pipes, and the Centurions wake up. This leads to a chaotic three-way battle. The Centurions and Spheres begin to attack the Falmer who have infested their city. It is a spectacle to watch. Steam breath meeting frost magic, metal blades clashing against chitin axes. For a moment, you can stand back and let the environment do the work for you, but eventually the robots will turn their red eyes toward you. You are an intruder just as much as the Falmer are. The obscure lore tidbit here involves the lost expedition of Nchardzel. As you explore, you find the journals of Strom, Urge, Crag, and Stolbin. They were a team of Imperial scholars and soldiers who tried to retake the city years ago. Their story is a grim mirror of your own journey. They split up to cover more ground, the classic horror movie mistake, and were picked off one by one. You find their bodies in the different districts, looting their armour and reading their final, terrified thoughts. The Falmer, they are everywhere. The walls have eyes. It adds a haunted layer to the exploration. You're walking through a graveyard of ambition. The poisoned web aspect of the dungeon isn't just literal, it's metaphorical. Ncharzel traps you in its complexity. The map is notoriously difficult to read because of the overlapping levels. You will spend a significant amount of time just trying to figure out how to get to the quest marker that is seemingly floating in empty space. You run up a ramp, cross a bridge, go through a door, and realise you're now above the marker. You go back down, take a different turn, and end up in a dead end filled with chorus. It is a navigational headache that tests your spatial awareness to its breaking point. And let's talk about the Falmer here. They are dug in deep. They have fortified the bridges and choke points. In the higher levels, the Falmer Gloomlurkers use the verticality against you, sniping with bows from ledges you can't reach. You have to engage in a long-range archery duel or risk a perilous climb while under fire. The combat is relentless. The community debate around Ncharzel often centres on the reactivation mechanic. Is it worth it? Turning on the defences kills the Falmer, but it also spawns high-level Dwemer constructs that act as bosses. Some players argue it's better to sneak through and leave the city dark. Others relish the chaos of the machine war, but everyone agrees on one thing: getting out is harder than getting in. Once you are deep in the armory, the path back to the surface is a long uphill slog. As you finally emerge back into the Understone Keep, smelling of spider venom and machine oil, you are greeted by the indifferent face of Calcelmo. He gives you a small amount of gold, completely unaware of the war you just started and finished beneath his feet. You leave Markarth, eager for the open sky. But the sky offers no respite. Our next journey takes us to the ancient ruins of the dragon cult, a place where magic goes to die. We are heading to Labyrinthian. It is a place of sorrow, a testing ground for archmages, and a dungeon designed to drain your resources in the most literal way possible. Labyrinthian sits in the mountain pass between Whiterun and Yarlmarch. It is a massive exterior ruin, a city of stone arches and crumbling walls, but the true horror lies inside. You are here for the College of Winterhold questline, seeking the Staff of Magnus. The dungeon is linear, a straight shot through history, but it is a gauntlet of scripted pain. Upon entering, you are greeted by the ghostly voices of the past. Savos Aren, the current archmage, was here years ago as a young apprentice. You see his ghost and the ghosts of his friends, full of bravado and optimism. We can handle this, they say. It's just some old ruins. You follow their projections deeper, watching their numbers dwindle, their optimism turning to terror as they realise they are outmatched. It is a tragic narrative device. You are witnessing the failure of the man who sent you here. The primary mechanic of Labyrinthian is the Magicka Drain. As you progress, you hear a voice speaking in an ancient tongue, Moroke, the dragon priest. Every time he speaks, your Magicka bar is completely emptied. For a warrior, this is annoying. For a mage, it is catastrophic. You are stripped of your primary weapon. You are forced to chug potions or hide until your energy regenerates, only for it to be drained again moments later. It is a mechanic designed to make you feel helpless. The enemies here are greatest hits of Skyrim's undead. You fight skeletons, draugr, wisp mothers, and even a skeletal dragon. The skeletal dragon is a memorable encounter, a pile of bones in a large room that reanimates and attacks. It doesn't fly, thankfully, but its breath weapon and bite are deadly in the enclosed space. It is surrounded by skeletons that act as a distraction. It's a chaotic fight, made worse by the fact that you likely have no magicka to cast healing spells. The core in-game fact here is the Dragon Priest Mask. At the end of the dungeon, you face Morake. He wields the Staff of Magnus, which drains your magicka and health. Combined with the scripted drain, this fight is a nightmare for casters. He floats around the room, shielding himself with lightning, a bullet sponge that demands everything you have. Defeating him yields his mask, which grants 100% magicka regeneration, a cruel irony after spending an hour with 0 magicka. Labyrinthian is exhausting. It is long, emotionally heavy, and mechanically punishing. But it is nothing compared to the siege that awaits us in the Rift. We're going to Forelhost. Pack your fire resistance and prepare for a climb. The dragon cult is waiting. High atop the southeastern peaks of the Rift, looming over the autumnal forest like a jagged tooth, sits the fortress of Forelhost. To reach it, you must leave the main roads and ascend a winding, treacherous path that feels abandoned by the gods themselves. The wind whips harder here, carrying the scent of ancient dust and dry pine needles. We're approaching the site of the dragon cult's last desperate stand. If Bleak Falls Barrow was a chore and Labyrinthian was a tragedy, Forelhost is a war of attrition. It is a dungeon that refuses to end, a sprawling complex that tests not just your combat skills, but your endurance as a player. You arrive at the courtyard to find a solitary figure, Captain Valmir. He wears the armour of an Imperial or a Stormcloak, depending on who controls the rift, but something feels off. He claims to be hunting a Dragon Priest mask for the war effort and asks for your help. This is the first annoyance, the deception. Valmir is not a soldier, he is an Altmer agent of the Thalmor, a scavenger manipulating you into doing the heavy lifting. He sends you into the lion's den while he waits comfortably by his tent. You, the Dragonborn, slayer of Alduin, are essentially being used as a glorified can opener for a Nazi elf treasure hunter. You enter the fortress, and the heavy iron doors slam shut behind you. The atmosphere in Forelhost is distinct. It is dry, silent, and incredibly preserved. Unlike the damp caves of the Falmer, this is a military installation. The first thing you notice is the ghosts. Forelhost is haunted not just by draugr, but by the spirits of the dragon cultists themselves. They appear as translucent blue figures, still patrolling the hallways, still fighting a war that ended thousands of years ago. The core in-game fact that defines Forelhost is the sheer density of high-level undead. This dungeon is notorious for its draugr deathlords and draugr scourges. In the narrow corridors you are constantly shouted at. Fusrodar echoes off the walls every few minutes, ragdolling you across the room, knocking over urns, and disrupting your attack rhythm. It is a pinball machine of pain. The Deathlords here wield ebony weapons, hitting like trucks, and they have massive health pools. Clearing a single room can feel like a boss fight in any other dungeon. As you push deeper, you begin to uncover the story of the siege. You find the journal of Skorm Snowstrider, the Nordic commander who laid siege to this place in the First Era. The lore here is dark and fascinating. The dragon cult, cornered and starving, refused to surrender. They didn't die in battle, they died by their own hand. You find the poisoned well in the refectory, the source of their mass suicide. You walk through rooms filled with the wrapped bodies of children and acolytes, a grim tableau of fanaticism. The garden area, an indoor arboretum withered by time, is particularly haunting. A place that was once beautiful now reduced to grey dust and silence. The layout of Forelhost is a masterclass in dungeon fatigue. It is divided into 3 massive zones: the stronghold, the crypt, and the refectory. Just when you think you've reached the end, you find another door, another loading screen, and another mile of corridor. The puzzles are the standard claw and handle variety, specifically the glass claw, but they feel like speed bumps designed to slow your momentum. You aren't solving them with enthusiasm. You're solving them with a sigh, just wanting to see the sky again. Then there are the traps. Forelhost loves its pressure plates, but the most insidious trap is the water. In the crypts you have to swim through submerged tunnels. The water is dark, murky, and often hides spikes or slaughter fish. Navigating these sections in first-person view is a claustrophobic nightmare. You are drowning in the dark, bumping into floating dragur corpses, trying to find the air pocket before your screen fades to black. It taps into a primal fear of deep water and enclosed spaces. An obscure lore. Tidbit that often goes unnoticed is the presence of the dragon cultist armor set. This is one of the few places in the game where you can loot the unique robes and masks worn by the cultists, similar to those in the Dragonborn DLC, but the base game version. It implies that this sect was distinct, perhaps more militaristic than the ones found on Solstheim. They were the elite guard of Ragot, holding the line while their empire crumbled around them. Speaking of Ragot, the final confrontation is brutal. You emerge onto the battlements, the wind howling around you. Ragot bursts from his sarcophagus, surrounded by 4 high-level draugr deathlords. The arena is small and the risk of being shouted off the edge of the mountain is real. Ragot himself is a powerhouse of fire magic. He wields the eponymous mask, Ragot, which grants +170 stamina. This leads to a bit of community debate. Is the reward worth the effort? +170. Stamina is massive for a warrior build, allowing for more power attacks and sprinting, but for a mage or a thief, it's a paperweight. Many players argue that Forelhost is a dungeon you do once for the achievement and never return to. The time investment, easily 45 minutes to an hour on higher difficulties, rarely matches the loot found in the chests. After defeating Ragot and claiming his mask, you step out onto the balcony. This is the grand exit. You're hundreds of feet up, overlooking the rift. But the annoyance isn't over. You have to go back to the courtyard to confront Valmir. He's waiting there, accompanied by a soldier disguised as an ally. He attacks you, demanding the mask. It is a satisfying moment to finally put him down, to end the deception, but it's just one last combat encounter when you are already drained. Forelhost leaves you feeling weary. It is a dungeon that captures the grim reality of war, the slog, the repetition, the senseless death. You leave the mountain feeling older, your inventory clogged with heavy ebony weapons and ancient Nord armour you'll likely just sell to the nearest blacksmith. But as we descend from the rift, leaving the ghosts of the dragon cult behind, we must prepare for a journey that is less about war and more about the unknown. We are heading west, to the border of High Rock, to a cave that serves as a bridge to a forgotten world. We are going to Darkfall Cave. Most players stumble upon this location during the Dawnguard DLC. It starts innocuously enough. A rickety wooden bridge, a few spiders, a seemingly standard cave system. But Darkfall Cave is a lie. It is not a cave, it is a transition zone. It is the throat of the world that swallows you whole and spits you out into the forgotten Vale. The defining feature of Darkfall Cave is the darkness. True to its name, it is pitch black. Torches and candlelight spells are not just helpful here, they are mandatory. The ambient light is non-existent. You're walking on narrow, winding stone bridges suspended over a rushing underground river. The sound design is oppressive. The roar of the water drowns out the footsteps of the enemies, and the enemies are trolls. Not just regular trolls, but cave trolls, regenerating beasts that lunge out of the shadows. In the dark, you often don't see them until they are right on top of you. The combat becomes a frantic flailing of torches and fire spells, trying to stop their health regeneration while not falling into the river below. If you fall, the current sweeps you away. You are battered against the rocks, disoriented, washing up in a lower chamber filled with spiders, forced to find your way back up in the gloom. The bridge to nowhere feeling is palpable. You keep descending, crossing bridge after bridge, expecting a boss room or a treasure chest. Instead, you find Gelebor, Knight Paladin Gelebor, one of the last 2 remaining snow elves in existence. Meeting Gelebor is a core in-game fact that shifts the entire tone of the DLC. He is not a twisted Falmer. He is a pristine, articulate ancient elf. He stands before a shrine to Auriel, a beacon of light in the crushing dark. He tells you of his duty, of the betrayal of his people, and of the path you must take. He asks you to kill his brother Vyrthur. To do so, you must fill the initiate's ewer with water from the Chantry Way shrines. This conversation is the gateway to the next massive section of our journey. But before you can leave, Gelebor opens the portal. The stone wall dissolves, revealing a blinding white light. You step through, leaving the dark, troll-infested tunnels of Skyrim behind. Darkfall Cave is annoying because it is a barrier. It is the friction before the release. It is designed to make you feel blind and vulnerable, so that the reveal of the Forgotten Vale feels majestic, but on a replay, it's just 10 minutes of squinting at your monitor, spamming Mage Light and hoping you don't walk off a ledge. But as you step through the portal, the darkness vanishes. You're hit by the cold, clean air of a place that time forgot. A place of blinding white snow, frozen waterfalls and invisible predators. We have arrived at the Forgotten Vale, and if you thought Blackreach was big, you haven't seen anything yet. We leave the metallic ringing of the Dwemer cities behind and travel to the snowy pass that connects the plains of Whiterun to the marshes of Hjalmarch. The air here is thin, sharp, and carries the scent of ancient masonry crumbling under the weight of centuries. We are standing before the imposing grey arches of Labyrinthian. To the casual traveller, Labyrinthian is just a ruin, a place to perhaps kill a few trolls and loot a chest. But to the Dragonborn, specifically the Dragonborn who is enrolled in the College of Winterhold, it is a tomb of memories. You are here for the Staff of Magnus, the only artifact capable of piercing the shield surrounding the college. But you're also here to witness the failure of those who came before you. Labyrinthian is not just a dungeon, it is a narrative echo chamber, a place where the ghosts of the past walk beside you, whispering of their own hubris. The exterior is massive, a city of stone that hints at the grandeur of the ancient dragon, Cult. You fight your way through the frost trolls that have claimed the outer courtyards, brutes that regenerate health and test your fire damage output, before reaching the ceremonial door. You unlock it with the torque, a heavy iron ring that feels cold in your hands. The doors groan open, and the smell of stagnant air and old magic washes over you. As you step into the gloom, a voice booms through the chamber. It is not human. It is a guttural, ancient language that vibrates in your chest. And then it happens. The screen blurs, a blue tint washes over your vision, and your magicka bar is instantly drained to 0. This is the defining mechanic of Labyrinthian and the core in-game fact that makes this dungeon a nightmare for mages. The voice belongs to Maroke, the dragon priest locked deep within. Every time he speaks, which is often, he drains your magical energy. If you are playing a warrior with a big axe, this is an annoyance. If you are playing a pure mage reliant on spells for defense and offense, this is a death sentence. You're suddenly stripped of your wards, your summons, and your destruction bolts. You're left standing in the dark, clutching a dagger you barely know how to use, frantically opening your inventory to chug potions. It is a mechanic designed to make you feel powerless, to strip away the fantasy of the all-powerful wizard and leave you feeling like a frightened apprentice. But you are not the only apprentice here. As you recover your senses, you see them, ghostly figures standing near the entrance. It is Savos Aren, the current archmage of the college, but he is young. He's accompanied by a group of other students, Hafnar, Elverly, Takes in Light, Atma, and Gyrdwin. They are laughing, joking about the adventure ahead. We can handle anything, they say. We'll be back at the college in time for dinner. It is a masterful piece of storytelling. You are watching a tragedy unfold in slow motion. You know Savos Aren as the tired, melancholy leader who gave you the talks. Now you see why. You follow their projections deeper into the ruins, watching their optimism slowly turn to dread. You find their bodies, not the ghosts, but the actual skeletal remains, scattered throughout the dungeon. You realise that the monsters you are fighting are the things that killed them. The first major chamber is a cavernous room, dominated by a skeletal dragon. This is not the majestic, fleshy beast you fight on the mountaintops. This is a pile of bones that rattles to life, a necromantic horror that does not fly but prowls the ground like a massive reptilian wolf. The fight is claustrophobic. The dragon breathes frost, slowing your movement, while skeletons pepper you with arrows from the raised walkways. Without your magicka, which Maroke just drained again, you are forced to use shouts and raw desperation to survive. Labyrinthian is a gauntlet. It is linear, forcing you to push forward through room after room of dragur and spectral enemies. The sheer density of the undead here is overwhelming. You're fighting the elite of the dragon cult, the draugr deathlords and scourges who are buried here to protect the priest. They shout at you, disarming you, ragdolling you across the room. The combat rhythm is broken constantly by Maroke's voice and the accompanying drain. You learn to time your attacks, to hoard your magicka for the brief windows of silence. As you progress, the ghostly scenes of Savos and his friends become darker. They start losing members. Gyrdwin, he didn't make it, one whispers. We have to go back, another pleads. But young Savos, driven by ambition or perhaps fear of returning as a failure, presses them on. We can't stop now, we're almost there. It mirrors your own journey. You too are pressing on, driven by the quest log, unable to turn back. The dungeon forces you to walk in the footsteps of a man who led his friends to their deaths. An obscure lore tidbit. Found in this dungeon is the etched tablet near the entrance, often missed by players rushing to get out of the cold. It reads, "Live in Labyrinthian, Labyrinthian live." It's a nonsensical phrase in English, but lore scholars believe it is a mistranslation or a puzzle related to the layout of the city itself. In the ancient tongue, Labyrinthian was known as Bromjunar, the capital of the dragon cult. This was the seat of their power, the place where the masks were brought to be placed on the shrine. Walking through these halls, you're walking through the Vatican of the dragon worshippers, a place of immense holy significance that has been reduced to a monster-filled corridor. The environment changes as you descend. You move from stone halls to the thoroughbred, a section where nature has reclaimed the ruins. Roots burst through the walls, and water floods the lower levels. Here, you encounter the Wisp Mother. She is the ethereal, deadly enemy who summons clones of herself, Indi. The dim light surrounded by fog, it is hard to tell which one is real. She hits with frost magic that drains your stamina, compounding the resource starvation Morake is inflicting on your magicka. It is a fight that feels slow, cold, and exhausting. Finally, you reach the tribune. The ghosts of Savos's party are down to 3. They are terrified. They realize they cannot win. We have to seal the door, Savos says. We have to keep him in. You realize the terrible truth. Savos Aran didn't defeat Morake. He sacrificed his 2 surviving friends to magically bind the dragon priest. He left them behind to be eternally tormented so that he could escape. The hero of the college, the man you looked up to, built his reputation on a foundation of cowardice and betrayal. It is a punch to the gut that hits harder than any dragur axe. You enter the final chamber, Morake waits for you. He floats in the centre of a massive room, shielded by an impenetrable energy barrier. 2 in thrall. Wizards, the ghosts of Savos's sacrificed friends, are channeling energy into the shield. To reach the boss, you must kill them. You have to finish the job Savos started. You have to release them from their torment by ending their existence. The fight with Morake is the climax of the annoyance. He wields the Staff of Magnus, which drains your magicka and then your health. He summons Storm Atronachs. He shouts. He moves fast, floating out of reach. If you are a mage, this is your nemesis. You're fighting a mirror image of yourself, but one with infinite resources. You have to use the terrain, hiding behind pillars to break his line of sight, taking potshots with a bow, or rushing in for a desperate melee strike. When he finally falls, crumbling into a pile of ash, the silence is deafening. You loot his body. You take the Staff of Magnus, a twisting, organic-looking artifact. You take his mask, Morake, which ironically grants 100% magicka regeneration, the very resource he spent the last hour stealing from you. You look around the empty room. The ghosts are gone. The voice is silent. You find the back exit, a simple wooden door that leads out to the exterior of the ruin. You step out into the sunlight, but the victory feels hollow. You have the staff, yes. You can save the college. But you carry the weight of the story you just witnessed. Labyrinthian wasn't a test of strength. It was a lesson in the cost of power. You fast travel back to Winterhold, ready to play the hero, but you will never look at the Archmage's quarters the same way again. Labyrinthian drains you, not just of magicka, but of your trust in the legends of Skyrim. It is a long, sad, exhausting trudge through the mud of history. But there is no time to mourn the past. The dragon cult had other strongholds, other leaders who refused to go quietly into the night. We must leave the marshes and head to the southeast, to the high peaks of the rift. A fortress waits for us there, one that sits closer to the sky than any other. Pack your fire resistance potions and prepare for a siege. We are going to Forelhost. We leave the gloomy marshes and the ghosts of the college behind, turning our eyes to the southeast. We are heading to the rift, a hold usually associated with golden aspen trees, autumnal lakes, and the corrupt bustling of Riften. But we're not going to the city. We're going up. High above the tree line, perched on a jagged spur of the Gerald Mountains that separates Skyrim from Cyrodiil, sits the fortress of Forelhost. If Labyrinthian was a tragedy of magic, Forelhost is a tragedy of war. It is the site of the dragon cult's last desperate stand against the first era of men, and for the modern player it is a dungeon that tests your endurance not with puzzles, but with sheer, unadulterated combat density. The climb to Forelhost is the first annoyance. There is no easy road. You have to scramble up goat paths, fighting off snow bears and saber cats that seem to spawn every 50 feet. The wind howls here, stripping the warmth from your armour, carrying the scent of pine and ancient dust. When you finally reach the courtyard, you're greeted not by a monster but by a man, Captain Valmir. He stands by a tent dressed in the armour of whichever faction currently holds the rift, Imperial or Stormcloak. He looks busy, important, and authoritative. He tells you he is hunting a dragon priest mask for the war effort and asks for your help to breach the ruins. This is the first crack in the facade, the first irritation that gnaws at the back of your mind. Valmir is clearly capable. He is armed, armoured, and camping right outside the door. Yet, he sends you in. He claims the door is locked and he can't pick it. He treats the Dragonborn, the Slayer of Alduin, the Thane of every hold, like a wandering mercenary looking for a few gold coins. You accept the quest, Siege on the Dragon Cult, because the quest log demands it, but deep down, you know you are being used. Valmir is the ultimate middle manager of Skyrim NPCs, delegating the hard work while he waits for the performance review. You enter the fortress, and the heavy iron doors slam shut, sealing you in a silence that feels heavy and pressurized. Forelhost is incredibly well preserved. Unlike the collapsed caves of the Falmer or the flooded ruins of Nchardak, this place feels like a military installation that was abandoned only yesterday. But it wasn't abandoned. It was a tomb from the moment the doors were locked thousands of years ago. The interior is prowled by ghosts. These are the spirits of the dragon cultists still patrolling the halls in their ethereal blue forms. They are restless, angry, and bound to the site of their mass suicide. But the ghosts are the least of your worries. The core in-game fact that defines the Forelhost experience is the density of high-level undead. This dungeon is infamous for its draugr deathlords and draugr scourges. In the tight, narrow corridors of the fortress, you are constantly engaged in a shouting match. Fusrodar echoes off the stone, walls every few minutes. You are ragdolled across the room, knocking over burial urns, your camera spinning wildly as your character struggles to stand up, only to be hit by an ebony arrow before the animation finishes. It is a pinball machine of pain. The Deathlords here have massive health pools and wield weapons that hit like trucks. Clearing a single hallway can feel like a boss fight in any other dungeon. As you fight your way through the stronghold, you begin to uncover the story of the siege. This is where the obscure lore tidbit comes into play. Scattered throughout the dungeon are the journals and notes of Skorm Snowstrider, the Nordic commander who laid siege to Forelhost in the First Era. The history books usually paint the Nords as glorious conquerors who swept the dragon cult aside. But the journals here reveal a grim reality. Skorm didn't storm the castle, he starved them out. He waited at the gates for weeks, knowing the cultists inside were running out of food, and when he finally breached the doors, he didn't find an army waiting to fight. He found a graveyard. The cultists, realizing hope was lost, chose death over surrender. They poisoned their own water supply. You eventually reach the refectory, the dining hall of the fortress. It is a haunting sight. The tables are set, the food is rotted to dust, and the bodies are everywhere. You walk through the poisoned garden, an indoor arboretum that was once the source of their alchemy ingredients. Now it is a withered grey ruin filled with the deathbell flowers that likely provided the toxin. The atmosphere is stifling. You're walking through the aftermath of a Jonestown-style event, a mass suicide pact driven by fanaticism. The ghosts you fight aren't just guarding treasure, they are guarding the shame of their final moments. Forelhost is massive. It is divided into 3 distinct zones: the stronghold, the crypt, and the refectory. Just when you think you've cleared the castle, you find a door leading down. The crypt is a damp, claustrophobic nightmare. This leads to one of the most hated mechanics in the game, underwater navigation. To progress, you often have to swim through submerged tunnels to bypass collapsed corridors. The water is murky, dark, and filled with floating debris. You can't fight effectively while swimming. You can't cast spells. You are vulnerable, holding your breath, praying you don't get snagged on a piece of geometry while a slaughterfish nips at your heels. It taps into a primal fear of drowning in the dark, and it slows the pacing of the dungeon to a crawl. Then comes the puzzle. Of course, there is a puzzle. You need the glass claw to open the door to the final sanctum. Unlike the golden claw, which you usually find on a bandit near the entrance, the glass claw is located deep within the dungeon, often requiring you to backtrack or take a specific side path you might have missed. It feels like a fetch quest inside a fetch quest. You find the claw, you rotate the rings, fox, owl, snake. The solution is always on the palm, and the great stone door grinds open. You ascend the final stairs expecting relief, but instead you step out onto the battlements. You're back outside, high in the freezing air, on a balcony overlooking the rift. The view is spectacular, but you have no time to admire it. Ragot is waking up. Ragot is one of the named dragon priests, and he is a tank. He bursts from his sarcophagus surrounded by 4 high-level draugr deathlords. The arena is small, cramped, and dangerous. The risk of being shouted off the edge of the mountain is real. Ragot wields a staff of firewalls, turning the small battlefield into an oven. He floats, he heals, and he summons Atronachs. It is a chaotic, messy brawl that requires you to burn through every potion you have saved. When Ragot finally falls, crumbling into ash, you claim his mask. Ragot. This leads to a significant community debate. Is the reward worth the suffering? The mask grants plus 170 stamina. For a heavy armor warrior who loves power attacks and sprinting, this is a godsend. It effectively gives you 7 free levels worth of stamina upgrades, but for a mage, for a thief, it is a heavy, useless paperweight. Many players argue that Forelhost is a one-and-done dungeon, something you complete for the achievement or the collection, but never return to on subsequent playthroughs because the time investment, easily 45 minutes to an hour, doesn't justify a stat boost you can replicate with an enchantment. But the annoyance isn't over. You have the mask, you have cleared the ruins, you step through the exit which dumps you back into the courtyard, and there is Valmir. He's still there, he hasn't moved an inch, but now he's not alone. He's dressed in his true colours, Thalmor robes, or perhaps he just reveals his allegiance by attacking you. It turns out he was an agent of the Aldmeri Dominion all along, seeking the masks, to hoard power for the elves. He orchestrated the whole thing using you as a tool. The fight with Valmir is satisfying in a way. You get to punish the middle manager. You cut him down, looting his orders which confirm his deception. But it leaves a bitter taste. You just slaughtered an entire fortress of ancient ghosts, survived a poisoned well, swam through a flooded crypt and killed a demigod priest, all to be betrayed by the guy who was supposed to be paying you. Forelhost leaves you feeling heavy. It is a dungeon that captures the grim, unglamorous reality of war. The slog, the repetition, the senseless death, and the treachery. You descend the mountain path, your inventory clogged with heavy ebony weapons and ancient Nord armour. You will likely just sell to the nearest blacksmith in Riften. You are richer, yes, but you are also exhausted. And yet, as we leave the sunlight of the rift, the game demands we go back into the dark. We must leave the open sky and the stone, fortresses for a place that bridges the gap between the known world and the forgotten. We are heading west to the Reach, to a cave that promises a simple adventure but delivers a descent into a lost timeline. We are heading to Darkfall Cave. The road to our next destination takes us to the northwestern edge of Skyrim, into the craggy, rain-swept borderlands between the Reach and Halfengar. It is a lonely stretch of country, populated mostly by orc strongholds and the occasional confused bear. We are looking for a hole in the rock, a specific, unassuming cave entrance that serves as the bottleneck for the entire Dawnguard expansion. We are standing before the maw of Darkfall Cave. Most players arrive here with a sense of urgent purpose. You have the Elder Scrolls, you have the prophecy, you are ready to confront the tyranny of the sun. You expect an epic dungeon, a grand fortress befitting the endgame of a vampire apocalypse. Instead, you get a rickety wooden bridge that collapses under your own weight. Darkfall Cave is not a dungeon you conquer, it is a dungeon you survive. It is a transition zone, a long dark throat that swallows you whole and spits you out into a lost world. And the primary reason you should never enter it twice is simple: you cannot see a single thing inside. The defining feature of Darkfall Cave, its core in-game fact, is the oppressive, suffocating darkness. In most of Skyrim's caves, darkness is an aesthetic choice. There is usually a convenient patch of glowing mushrooms, a hole in the ceiling letting in moonlight, or a lit torch sconce every 10 feet. Not here. Darkfall Cave is pitch black. It is true, absolute darkness that renders your monitor settings irrelevant. If you do not have a torch, a candlelight spell, or the Khajiit Night Eye ability, you are effectively playing blind. You're navigating by sound and the friction of your face hitting the wall. This reliance on light sources creates a unique, albeit frustrating, gameplay loop. You're forced to sacrifice your combat effectiveness for visibility. If you are a two-handed warrior or a dual-wielding rogue, you have to put away a weapon to hold a torch. You're fighting with one hand tied behind your back, or rather occupied by a burning stick. If you are a mage, you're constantly recasting mage light, watching the ball of light float away and reveal the horror waiting for you, only for it to expire right when the combat starts. And the combat here is brutal. The cave is infested with trolls, not just the standard frost trolls of the surface, but cave trolls, beasts that seem adapted to the gloom. They regenerate health rapidly, and in the tight winding tunnels there is no room to kite them. The darkness amplifies their terror. You hear the heavy, wet slap of their feet on the stone, the grunt of exertion, but you often don't see them until the red health bar appears at the top of your screen. You swing your torch wildly, trying to apply the fire damage needed to stop their regeneration, while backing up onto a bridge that might not even be there. The architecture of the cave is designed to disorient. It is dominated by a rushing underground river that carves through the rock. The path forward is a series of precarious wooden suspension bridges that sway over the water. This leads to the washing machine mechanic. If you slip, and you will, either from a troll attack or simply misjudging the edge of the cliff in the dark, you fall into the river. The current is too strong to swim against. You're swept away, battered against rocks, the screen shaking, until you are dumped into a lower chamber. This lower chamber is the spider nest, because of course it is. If the trolls and the darkness weren't enough, the game punishes your failure with arachnids. You have to fight your way through swarms of frostbite spiders in a damp, dead-end cavern just to find the winding ramp that leads back up to the trolls you failed to kill the first time. It is a punishment loop that feels vindictive. As you push deeper, the wooden bridges give way to stone. The cave opens up, but the darkness remains. You begin to see signs of something older than the trolls, a pristine white stone archway, a statue that looks elven, but different. You have reached the chantry. This is the moment the dungeon shifts from a survival horror experience to a lore dump. You cross a final bridge to find a small lit pavilion. Standing there is a figure in white armour. He's not a vampire, he's not a bandit, he is Knight Paladin Gelebor. Meeting Gelebor is one of the most significant moments in the Elder Scrolls lore. He is a snow elf, a real snow elf. Not the twisted, blind Falmer you have been slaughtering by the hundreds, but an ancient, uncorrupted member of the race that built Skyrim before the Nords arrived. He is articulate, polite, and tragic. He stands as the lone guardian of the Chantry of Auriel, waiting for a pilgrim who never comes. This interaction provides an obscure lore tidbit that reframes the entire history of the Falmer. Gelebor explains that the betrayed, the blind Falmer, are not just de-evolved monsters, they are a distinct divergent branch of his people. He refers to them with a mix of pity and revulsion. He reveals that while the Dwemer blinded the main population, pockets of snow elves like his order survived in isolation, only to be slowly whittled down by time and the betrayed. He is arguably the loneliest NPC in the game. He has stood in this dark cave for thousands of years, protecting a shrine to a god who seemingly abandoned his people. The conversation with Gelebor is fascinating the first time. He gives you the quest touching the sky, handing you the initiate's ewer and tasking you with filling it at the way shrines. But on a replay, this dialogue is a massive pacing break. You just want to get to the Vale, you just want the bow, but you have to stand there and listen to the history lesson while the trolls respawn behind you. Gelebor eventually raises the way shrine. The stone wall behind him dissolves, replaced by a swirling portal of light. This is the exit. This is the reward for surviving the dark. You step through the portal, leaving the suffocating gloom of the cave behind. The transition is jarring. You go from absolute blackness to blinding white. But before we step into the light of the next section, we must acknowledge why Darkfall Cave is on this list. It is a dungeon that removes player agency. By taking away your sight, it forces you to play slowly, tentatively. It turns the power fantasy of the Dragonborn into a stumbling, fumbling walk through a damp basement. It is a necessary evil, a narrative tunnel that connects the known world to the unknown, but it is a tunnel you never want to walk through again. The bridge to nowhere feeling is palpable throughout the entire run. You keep descending, crossing bridge after bridge, expecting a boss room or a treasure chest, but the only reward is more cave. The layout is linear, but feels maze-like because of the lack of landmarks. Every rock looks the same when you can only see 2 feet in front of your face. There is also a fan. Theory that suggests Darkfall Cave was originally intended to be much larger, perhaps a full underground zone connecting to Blackreach. The presence of the underground river and the deep chasm hints at a geology that links to the other deep places of Skyrim. Some players speculate that the Fulmahir are trying to tunnel up to the surface, using the cave as a staging ground for a surface raid, which explains the high density of trolls, used as war beasts, and the intricate bridge systems. Gelebor is essentially the cork in the bottle, the one man holding back the tide of the betrayed from spilling out into the Reach. But for the player, Gelebor is just the guy who opens the door. You fill your water bottle, you nod at the sad elf, and you run toward the light. You are desperate for a change of scenery. You're desperate to see the sky. And you will see the sky. You will see a sky unlike any other in Tamriel. You will see frozen waterfalls, invisible dragons, and a map so large and confusing it makes the darkness of the cave seem comforting by comparison. We are leaving the cave behind. We are stepping into the lost sanctuary of the Snow Elves. The transition from the suffocating darkness of Darkfall Cave to the Forgotten Vale is one of the most jarring visual shocks in the Elder Scrolls Firsviv, Skyrim. One moment, you are squinting at the black pixels of your monitor, praying you don't step off a wet rock into a troll-infested river. The next, your screen is flooded with blinding white light. You step through the portal and emerge into a hidden pocket of creation, a pristine, untouched wilderness that feels removed from time itself. The Forgotten Vale is breathtaking. It is a masterpiece of level design, featuring cascading frozen waterfalls, verdant glades protected from the cold, and a sky that seems to shimmer with a perpetual magical aurora. But once the initial awe fades, usually around the time you realise just how massive this place is, the fatigue sets in. We have arrived at bullet 11 of our journey, and we are entering the territory of map defiance. The Forgotten Vale is not just a dungeon, it is a sprawling, open-world zone that exists outside the main map of Skyrim. It has no clear boundaries, a confusing layout that loops back on itself, and a quest objective that requires you to trek across miles of snow to fill a water pitcher. You are here to complete the trials of the Chantry of Auriel. Knight Paladin Gelebor has given you the Initiate's Ewer, a fancy ceremonial jug, and tasked you with visiting 5 way shrines scattered across the valley. It sounds simple enough, a pilgrimage, but in practice, it is a marathon. The way shrines are not conveniently located in a line. They are placed at the tops of mountains, behind winding canyons, and across precarious bridges. And because the Vale is its own world space, your standard map is often unhelpful, showing a flat grey texture that fails to convey the sheer verticality of the cliffs you need to scale. As you begin your trek, you encounter the local wildlife. The Vale is home to unique variants of familiar creatures, Gleam Blossom, glowing in the bushes, docile Vale deer, and sabre cats that have adapted to the light. It feels peaceful, almost serene. That is, until you step on the ice. The frozen lakes of the Vale are not empty. They are minefields. This brings us to a core in-game fact that terrified players when the Dawnguard DLC first launched. The Naslarum and Voslarum encounter. You're walking across a vast frozen expanse, feeling exposed but relatively safe, when the ice beneath your boots explodes. 2 revered dragons burst from the water simultaneously. It is a scripted ambush that defies the usual dragon logic. Dragons are supposed to fall from the sky, not erupt from the ground like oversized trapdoor spiders. Fighting 2 dragons at once on a slippery surface with no cover, while they dive in and out of the freezing water, is a chaotic, memorable, and often frustrating spike in difficulty. The fan community has long debated the nature of these two dragons. Why were they under the ice? Were they hiding from Alduin? Were they guarding the word wall located on the nearby island? Or were they simply trapped, hibernating until the vibrations of the Dragonborn's footsteps woke them? Their names, Naslarum and Voslarum, don't appear in the main dragon language translations, adding to their mystery. They are simply the guardians of the Vale, anomalous beasts in an anomalous land. But the dragons are a distraction. The real grind of the Forgotten Vale is the navigation. To reach the distant way shrines, you often have to enter sub-dungeons, most notably the Glacial Crevice. This is a cruel joke by the developers, a dungeon inside a dungeon. Just when you think you're making progress across the surface, you are forced back underground into a narrow, winding ice tunnel filled with Falmer. And these aren't the Falmer you're used to. The Forgotten Vale is the ancestral home of the Snow Elves, and while Gelebor represents what they were, the enemies here represent what they have become. The betrayed here are more tribal, more entrenched. They live in huts made of strange hardened chitin, perched on cliffs overlooking the waterfalls. They wield powerful poisons and utilize the vertical terrain to rain arrows down on you. There is an obscure lore tidbit hidden in the Vale involving the unknown books. As you explore, you might find 4 volumes of ancient Falmer tomes. These are not skill books, they are untranslated texts. If you bring them to Urag Groshab at the College of Winterhold, he can translate them, revealing a tragic glimpse into the culture that was lost. The books don't offer a power boost, but they provide context for the genocide and degradation of the Snow Elves. It's a sad, optional fetch quest that requires you to scour every corner of this massive map, adding hours to your playtime for a bit of depressing backstory. Then there are the Paragons. This is the completionist nightmare. Wandering the Vale are 5 frost giants, massive hairy brutes that carry unique gems called Paragons: amethyst, diamond, emerald, ruby, sapphire. These gems act as keys for a specific teleporter platform that takes you to hidden loot rooms. To get them all, you have to hunt down every giant in the valley. It's a scavenger hunt spread across acres of white nothingness. You find yourself wandering aimlessly, squinting at the horizon asking, is that a rock or a giant? The psychological toll of the Forgotten Vale comes from its loneliness. It is beautiful, yes, but empty. You're the only living thing that doesn't belong here. Gelebor appears at each way shrine to open the gate, but his dialogue is repetitive. You fill the ewer, the portal opens, and you trudge to the next one. By the time you reach the final shrine, the novelty of the scenery has worn off. You just want to reach the inner sanctum. The inner sanctum itself is the grand finale. It is a massive temple complex filled with the frozen Falmer. These are statutes, or so you think. As you walk past them, the ice cracks and they burst out, weapons drawn. It's a jump scare that works the first time and becomes a tedious hazard the 10th time. You enter the throne room to confront Archcurate Vyrthur, Gelebor's brother. The confrontation with Vyrthur is narrative gold, even if the fight is annoying. He reveals that he is a vampire infected by an initiate eons ago and felt abandoned by Auriel. In his spite, he created the prophecy to blot out the sun. The entire plot of the DLC was his temper tantrum against God. He collapses the ceiling on you, forcing you to fight waves of minions while dodging falling rocks before you finally chase him to the balcony. The balcony battle is iconic. You're fighting on a railingless platform overlooking the entire valley, the sun setting or rising in the distance. When you finally defeat him, the shrine rises and you claim Auriel's bow. It is a legendary weapon, capable of shooting the sun itself. The payoff is huge, but as you stand there holding the bow, looking out over the miles of snow you just traversed, the feeling isn't triumph, it's relief. Relief that you don't have to walk back. You can fast travel now. You leave the Forgotten Vale behind, a place of stunning beauty that you never want to navigate again. However, the Dawnguard DLC isn't done with you. The bow is just a tool. To use it, or rather, to understand the prophecy fully, you often have to deal with the consequences of the other side of the story. Or perhaps, in a different timeline, you sought the Elder Scroll in a different realm. We are leaving the cold, clean light of Auriel and descending into a place that is the polar opposite, a place of purple skies, cracked earth, and the souls of the damned. We are going to the Soul Cairn. If the Forgotten Vale was too big and too bright, the Soul Cairn is too big and too dark. It is purgatory with a bad colour palette. It is the place where, trapped souls go, and coincidentally where player patience goes to die. You need the Elder Scroll, Blood. Serana, your vampire companion, opens the portal in the study of Castle Volkihar. She warns you that it will be unpleasant. She's right. You step into the portal and the world turns violet. The sky is a swirling vortex of necrotic energy. The ground is grey dust and black rock. Lightning strikes the ground constantly, accompanied by thunder that is just loud enough to be irritating. You've entered the realm of the Ideal Masters, entities who trade in souls and offer nothing but misery in return. Your goal here is to find Valerica, Serana's mother. But like the Vale, the Soul Cairn is a massive open zone with no map markers. The map itself is a crude drawing that is practically useless. You are told to follow the towers, but in the dark, every tower looks the same. You wander through the gloom, attacked by bonemen, mistmen and wrathmen, skeletal enemies that are easy to kill, but spawn in endless droves. But the true horror of the Soul Cairn is not the combat, it is the side quests. Specifically the quest given by the ghost of St. Giube. Yes, that Giube. The Dunmer who woke you up on the boat in Morrowind. Wake up, we're here. Why are you shaking? He was canonised for driving the cliff racers from Vvardenfell, only to die during the Oblivion Crisis and end up here. He asks you to find the pages of his memoir. 10 pages. Scattered across the entire Soul Cairn. No quest markers. This is widely considered the single most hated fetch quest in Skyrim. The pages are just pieces of paper lying on the ground, often blended in with the grey textures of the stone. You have to scour the wasteland, looking for tiny white rectangles in a world of purple fog. It is a task that breaks the spirit. You do it because you want the locket that increases your carrying capacity and stamina, or simply because you love Giube, but you curse the developers with every step. The visual identity of the Soul Cairn is singular, oppressive and relentlessly violet. While the Forgotten Vale blinded you with white, the Cairn suffocates you with purple. It is a realm of eternal twilight, where the sky is a bruised ceiling of swirling necrotic clouds and the ground is a desolate expanse of grey ash and cracked black stone. You're walking through the digestive tract of the Ideal Masters, entities that feed on the spiritual energy of the trapped dead, and the environment reflects this consumption. It is barren, hopeless, and, from a gameplay perspective, maddeningly difficult to navigate. We established the horror of St. Giube's quest in the previous breath, but to truly understand the annoyance, we must walk the path. The impatience of a saint is not just a fetch quest, it is a test of your monitor's contrast settings. The pages of Giube's opus are scattered seemingly at random, some placed on stone pedestals that blend into the architecture, others lying, flat on the ground in dark corners. Because the ambient lighting is so poor, and the fog draws distance and close, you often have to walk right over a page to see it. There are no map markers. Let me repeat that for the drowsy adventurers in the back. There are no map markers. In a modern RPG, this is a deliberate act of cruelty. You're forced to traverse the entire map, hugging the walls, squinting at pixels, while the ambient soundtrack drones on with a low, mournful hum that is occasionally punctuated by a thunderclap loud enough to wake you from a real-life nap. But Giube is just one facet of the Cairn's tedium. The sheer size of the zone is the real enemy. The Soul Cairn is surprisingly vast, filled with massive, imposing structures that all look identical. You see a black tower in the distance and think, maybe the objective is there. You sprint toward it, your stamina draining in the lifeless air, only to find it is just another lightning rod tower or a generic ruin housing. A chest containing 3 soul husks and an iron mace. The lack of landmarks makes spatial orientation nearly impossible. You will find yourself running in circles, convinced you are making progress, only to recognise a specific pile of bones you passed 20 minutes ago. However, amidst this purple purgatory, there is one beacon of light, or rather, a beacon of blue flame. This brings us to a beloved core in-game fact, the quest to find Arvak's skull. A distressed soul calls out to you, begging you to find his horse. It seems like another chore, but this one yields the single best reward in the entire DLC. Arvak is a skeletal horse with a mane of blue fire. When you retrieve his skull and return it, you gain the ability to summon him. In a zone where you cannot fast travel and walking is a slog, being able to conjure a mount from thin air is a godsend. Arvak is a good boy. He is loyal, He looks metal as hell, and he is the only friend you have in this desolate wasteland. While, searching for Arvak and Jube's lost novel, you might stumble upon a building that looks important but offers no entry. This is the Reaper's Lair. This leads to our obscure lore tidbit for the section. Hidden throughout the Soul Cairn, usually under the large floating crystals that drain your health, are Reaper gem fragments. There are 3 of them. The game does not tell you this. There is no quest in your journal titled The Reaper's Fragments. You simply find a weird red rock and pick it up. If you are thorough enough to find all 3, you can place them on an altar in the Reaper's Lair to summon a secret boss, the Reaper. The anticipation for this fight is high. You expect a unique model, a Lord of the Ideal Masters, perhaps a difficult encounter that drops high-tier loot. The reality is disappointing. The Reaper is essentially a rescaled boneman with a battle axe and a hood. He vomits some green slime, hits reasonably hard and then dies, dropping 3 black soul, gems and a Daedra heart. It is the definition of an anti-climax. The effort required to find the fragments, dodging the life-draining crystals and fighting through waves of Wrathmen, far outweighs the reward. It is a secret added for the sake of having a secret, a hollow victory in a hollow world. The lore of the Soul Cairn, however, offers some fascinating community debate. Who or what are the Ideal Masters? You never see them directly. You only communicate with them through the massive floating pink crystals that hover above the structures. Some fans theorize that the Masters are the crystals, that they have shed their physical forms to become beings of pure magicka and soul energy. Others believe the crystals are merely conduits, microphones for entities that exist in a dimension beyond even this one. The dialogue with them is chilling. They view you not as a hero, but as a curiosity, a morsel that hasn't spoiled yet. They speak of payment and eternal service, highlighting the transactional nature of this realm. Every soul here was traded. Every ghost you fight was currency. Eventually you must stop wandering and finish the main quest. You reach the Boneyard, a massive arena separated from the rest of the cairn by a force field. To lower it, you must defeat the Keepers, 3 towering undead warriors who act as the jailers of Valerica. Once they fall, you enter the arena to face Durnevir. Durnevir is a tragic figure, a dragon who sought power through necromancy and made a deal with the Ideal Masters. He wanted to raise an army of the undead, and the Masters granted his wish by binding him to the Soul Cairn for eternity. His body is rotting, his scales flaking away to reveal the bone beneath, and he is unable to leave the realm without perishing. The fight with him is standard dragon fare, but the aftermath is touching. He doesn't die. He yields. He teaches you a shout to summon him into Tamriel. He just wants to fly in the real sky again, even for a few moments. It gives the Dragonborn a strange sense of responsibility. You are his parole officer. Finding Valerica, Serana's mother, is the narrative conclusion. She has been hiding here for eras, clutching the Elder Scroll. Her dialogue is lengthy, filling in the gaps of the vampire family drama, but by this point, you're likely mashing the skip button. You just want the scroll. You just want to leave. Exiting the Soul Cairn is a visceral relief. Stepping back through the portal into Valerica's study, seeing the stone walls of the castle and the normal non-purple lighting, feels like waking up from a fever dream. You have the scroll, you have the horse, and if you are masochistic enough, you have Jub's locket. You vow never to return. The Soul Cairn is a masterpiece of atmosphere that succeeds too well. It makes you feel the despair of eternity, and as a player, that is an exhaustion you don't need twice. But the vampiric fatigue is not over. The Dawnguard questline, or perhaps just the desire to explore, draws us to another location that deals with the undead. We must rewind slightly, perhaps to an earlier point in your playthrough, or perhaps to a new character who has just heard the rumours of the vampire hunters. We are going to the place where it all began, the awakening of the Daughter of Coldharbour. We are heading to Dimhollow Crypt. This dungeon is the inciting incident of the DLC, the place where you find Serana. It sounds exciting. Ancient vampire lords, hidden secrets, a mystery to solve. But on a replay, Dimhollow Crypt reveals itself to be a long linear slog punctuated by a puzzle that feels slower every time you do it. The entrance is located in the snowy peaks near the Lord Stone, a bitter trek up the mountainside. Inside, you're greeted by the usual suspects, vampires and their death hounds. The aesthetic is Gothic horror cavern, with jagged rocks, underground rivers, and the omnipresent coffins. The first section is a standard dungeon crawl: fight a vampire, loot a chest, kill a spider, move on. But it is the central chamber that earns its spot on this list. You arrive at a massive circular room. In the centre is a monolith. This is the puzzle. To unlock the monolith, you must push braziers around a circular track until the purple fire connects the patterns. It is visually very cool. The first time. The second time, you realise how slowly the Dragonborn pushes these heavy stone braziers. You have to push one, wait for it to click into place, run to the next one, push it, wait for the animation, run to the next. It is a slow, rhythmic tediousness. Scrape, clunk, scrape, clunk. You're just walking in circles waiting for the game to acknowledge that you know the solution. It is not a test of wit, it is a test of friction. While you're doing this, you are listening to the dialogue of the vampires you just killed, or rather the ones who were arguing before you killed them. They were debating who gets to claim the prize. One of them, Lochiel, is a minor annoyance, a mini-boss who serves only to delay you from the puzzle. The core in-game fact here is the awakening of Serana. Once the puzzle is solved, the monolith descends, revealing a stone sarcophagus. You open it, and out tumbles a woman with an Elder Scroll strapped to her back. This is Serana. She's groggy, confused, and immediately asks about the date. The Empire? Cyrodiil. Her confusion establishes just how long she's been asleep, but the annoyance of Dimhollow comes from the realization of what you have just unleashed. By waking Serana, you have started the longest escort mission in the game. She is now your follower. She cannot die, which is good, but she also complains about the weather, resurrects weak chickens to fight for you, and refuses to part ways until you take her home. Dimhollow is not just a dungeon, it is the adoption centre for a high-maintenance vampire princess. The exit from Dimhollow is a long winding path that leads to a word wall, drain vitality, and a fight with a few skeletons and a boss vampire. It feels tacked on, a way to ensure the dungeon meets a certain length requirement. You fight your way out, emerging onto a different part of the mountain, Serana in tow, shielding her eyes from the sun. Dimhollow Crypt is the gateway drug to the Dawnguard DLC. It promises adventure, but delivers a sliding block puzzle and a permanent companion. It is a dungeon you enter with excitement and leave with a sense of obligation. But let us leave the vampires behind. Let us return to the Dwemer, to the grinding gears and the brass pipes. But this time, we are not looking for a scroll or a city. We are looking for a ghost. We are going to the Reach again, to a ruin that echoes with the sorrow of a fallen adventurer. We are going to Arkhnthamz. The Reach is a land of jagged verticality, a place where the mountains don't just rise, they loom. We return here not for the city of Markarth, but for a ruin hidden in the southern crags, a place that holds a ghost and a grudge. We're going to Arkhnthamz. If Bleak Falls Barrow is about duty, and the Soul Cairn is about despair, Arkhnthamz is about regret. It is the starting point for one of the most acclaimed, yet exhausting quests in the Dawnguard DLC, Lost to the Ages. You likely stumble upon this place by accident, or perhaps you read a book called The Ethereum Wars and felt the tug of curiosity. As you enter the ruins, the familiar smell of Dwemer oil and ancient dust greets you, but there is a voice in the darkness. Turn back, it warns, before it's too late. This is Catria. She's not a dragur or a vampire, she's a ghost, a spectral Nord adventurer who died here. And unlike the cryptic spirits of the Soul Cairn, Catria is refreshingly brutally honest about how she died. She fell. Arkhnthamz is a dungeon defined by its precariousness. The architecture is a chaotic mix of collapsed pillars, giant rotating gears, and narrow pipes that span massive chasms. The annoyance factor here is high, because the path forward is rarely a straight line. You're constantly looking for the one pipe you can walk on, or the one ledge that isn't slippery. And all the while, Catria is floating beside you, offering commentary on her own failure. It's a unique dynamic. You're essentially doing a corpse run for an NPC who is already dead. The enemies here are the standard Dwemer roster, spiders and spheres, but they are backed up by the Falmer. The Falmer in Arkhnthamz seem particularly entrenched. They have built their chitin huts directly onto the Dwemer machinery, creating a hybrid environment where you might be fighting a robot one second and dodging a poisoned arrow the next. The vertical combat is intense. You often have to shoot at enemies on ledges far above or below you, hoping your arrows don't bounce off the brass plating. But the true centerpiece of Arkhnthamz, and the source of much player frustration, is the tonal lock. You reach the summit of the ruin to find a massive locked gate. Behind it lies the Ethereum Shard. To open it, you must solve a puzzle involving 5 kinetic resonators, spinning brass devices that must be struck in a specific order. Catria's journal gives you a hint, but the journal is dead, and the pages are scattered. If you hit the resonators in the wrong order, the dungeon punishes you. Not with a simple "try again" buzzer, but with a barrage of crossbow bolts, Dwemer spiders, and eventually a massive centurion. This puzzle is a core in-game fact that highlights the Dwemer's obsession with sound. Tonal architecture is not magic. It is science. They manipulated reality through sound waves. The resonators are a security system based on musical harmony. Playing the wrong note triggers the defenses. It is a brilliant bit of world building that is incredibly annoying when you're out of arrows and trying to hit a spinning target 20 feet in the air with a melee weapon. Which is impossible, by the way. Bring a bow. There is a tragic obscure lore tidbit hidden here. Catria's bow, Zephyr. You find it balanced precariously on the end of a log overlooking a deep chasm. It is a unique dwarven bow that fires 30% faster than standard bows. The placement tells the story of her death better than any dialogue. She was cornered, she retreated to the log to get a better shot, and she slipped. Or perhaps, the earthquake that devastated the ruin shook her off. Retrieving the bow requires a careful walk out onto the log, a moment of vertigo that mirrors her final seconds. The Lost to the Ages quest, which Arkhnthamz initiates, is a fan favourite, but it is also a massive grind. It requires you to visit 3 other Dwemer ruins, Raldbthar, Mzulft and Deepfolk Crossing, to collect the other shards. Arkhnthamz is just the appetizer. It is the hook that drags you into a province-wide scavenger hunt. The reward, the Ethereum Forge, allows you to craft unique items like the Ethereal Crown, which lets you have 2 standing stone effects at once. The community unanimously agrees the crown is one of the best items in the game, but the debate rages. Is it worth the hours of dungeon delving required to get it? Catria herself is a subject of much discussion. She's one of the few temporary followers who feels like a genuine partner. She helps you in combat, she has a personality, and her story of having her research stolen by her apprentice Taran Dreth adds a layer of academic vindictiveness to the quest. When you finally claim the shard and the quest updates, she doesn't vanish immediately. She lingers, hinting that the work isn't done. Leaving Arkhnthamz feels like leaving a friend behind. You walk out into the fresh air of the Reach, Zephyr on your back, a glowing blue crystal in your pocket, and a new to-do list that spans the entire map. It is a dungeon that succeeds in making you care, which makes the tedious platforming and the deadly puzzle forgivable, if only just. But as we collect the shards of the past, we must look to the future, or rather, to another island entirely. The call of the Dragonborn DLC pulls us away from the mainland. We are travelling to the ash-covered island of Solstheim. We are looking for knowledge, and we are going to find it in a city that is slowly sinking into the sea. We are heading to Nchardak. The boat ride from Windhelm to Solstheim is a journey not just across the Sea of Ghosts, but across the boundaries of nostalgia. You step off the boat into Raven Rock, and are immediately hit by the ash-choked wind, the red mountain looming on the horizon, smoking and sullen. We have left the pine forest of Skyrim behind for the alien landscape of Morrowind's northern outpost. But we are not here to reminisce about the Nerevarin. We are here for knowledge, and as is often the case in Tamriel, knowledge is buried deep underwater. We are heading to the sunken city of Nchardak. You arrive at the ruin accompanied by Master Neloth, a Telvanni wizard whose arrogance is matched only by his magical prowess. He is without a doubt one of the most entertaining and condescending escorts in the game. "Try not to get killed," he quips. "I'd hate to have to break in a new assistant." He treats the Dragonborn, the slayer of gods and dragons, like a slightly slow intern. It's a refreshing change of pace from the constant hero worship of the mainland, but it doesn't make the dungeon any less tedious. Nchardak is the water temple of Skyrim. The entire dungeon revolves around a single infuriating mechanic, manipulating water levels. The city is sinking into the sea, and to reach the black book held within its reading room, you must pump the water out of the lower levels. This requires the use of control cubes. The control cubes are small, heavy blocks that act as keys. You find one, plug it into a pedestal, and the water drains. You unplug it, and the water rises. The annoyance stems from the fact that you need multiple cubes to progress, and you often have to backtrack to retrieve a cube you used earlier, which then floods the room you just walked through. It is a constant juggling act of inventory management and spatial reasoning. You find yourself standing on a bridge, looking at a door you can't reach, realizing you left the critical blue cube in the previous zone. The architecture here is grander than the Skyrim Dwemer ruins. It feels more industrial, more massive. The Great Chamber is a cavernous space dominated by huge pumps and gears that groan with the effort of fighting the ocean. The sound design is oppressive, the constant rushing of water, the clanking of ancient pistons, and the wet slap of your boots on the metal grating. This dungeon introduces a specific enemy variant that haunts the nightmares of high-level players, the Dwarven Ballista. These are essentially automated tank snipers. They sit at the end of long corridors and fire spear-sized bolts that ignore a significant portion of your armor rating. In the narrow walkways of Nchardak, dodging them is difficult. You hear the mechanical thrum of the tension building, and then you are pinned to the wall. The core in-game fact here centres on the Path of Knowledge quest. Neloth is convinced that the Black Book epistolary acumen is inside. He guides you, but he doesn't help with the heavy lifting. He stands by the pedestals, examining the dust, while you swim through oily, freezing water to fetch the cubes. The dichotomy of his inaction and your frantic swimming is a perfect summary of the Telvanni philosophy. Why do it yourself when you can have a lesser being do it for you? As you descend into the aqueduct, the layout becomes a maze. You have to lower the water to fight enemies, then raise the water to swim to a higher ledge. It is slow. The swimming animation in Skyrim is not built for precision platforming, yet Nchardak demands it. You will inevitably miss a jump, splash into the water, and have to swim all the way back to a ramp to try again, all while Neloth sighs impatiently. An obscure lore tidbit found in Nchardak is the story of its fall. It wasn't destroyed by the Falmer or the Nords, it was destroyed by the sea. The Dwemer, in their hubris, built a city that defied the natural order, and nature eventually reclaimed it. The pumps have been running for thousands of years, fighting a losing battle against the tides. It's a subtle reminder of the Dwemer's ultimate flaw. They believed they could engineer their way out of anything, even geology. There is also a fan theory that Nchardak was a library city, a repository of tonal architecture schematics. The sheer number of pedestals and control mechanisms suggests a level of complexity not seen in other manufacturing cities like Mzulft. Some believe the control cubes themselves are data storage devices, and by plugging them in, you aren't just moving water, you are processing ancient code to reboot the city's operating system. The climax of the dungeon is the activation of the boilers. You have gathered all 5 cubes after much backtracking, and you place them in the central control unit. The boilers ignite, the Centurion awakens, and you fight a massive steam-powered guardian while the room shakes. It is a satisfying battle, primarily because it signals the end of the cube puzzles. Neloth opens the display case, and there it is, the Black Book. It looks like a tome bound in oil and tentacles pulsating with a dark energy. It is not a book you read, it is a book that reads you. This brings us to the threshold of our final destination. You touch the page, the world dissolves. The stone of Solstheim melts away, replaced by a swirling vortex of green ink and forbidden knowledge. You are no longer on Nirn. You have been pulled into the realm of the Daedric Prince of Fate. We have arrived at the end of the world, or perhaps the beginning of madness. We are entering the domain of Hermaeus Mora. Prepare your mind, for the geometry here does not obey the laws of physics. We are going to Apocrypha. The transition is not physical, it is mental. You touch the Black Book epistolary acumen in the damp ruins of Nchardak, and the world of Solstheim is ripped away. The sound of rushing water is replaced by the rustle of a billion dry pages and the squelch of something wet and unseen. You have arrived in Apocrypha, the plane of oblivion belonging to Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric Prince of Fate and forbidden knowledge. This is the final destination on our list, and it earns its place not because of a confusing layout or a damaged sponge boss, but because it is a psychedelic nightmare designed to disorient you. It is a library where the books read you, the walls move when you aren't looking, and the ocean wants to kill you. Visually, Apocrypha is a triumph of art direction. The sky is a sickly, swirling green vortex. The ground is made of stone and paper. Literally, stacks of books form the pillars, the bridges, and the arches. Papers flutter in a wind that smells of ozone and old ink, and everywhere there are tentacles. They writhe from the black pools of slime that serve as the ocean of this realm. This liquid is the primary hazard. In most games, water is safe. Here, the water is concentrated acidic knowledge. Dip a toe in, and the tentacles lash out, dealing massive damage. You're forced to stay on the narrow, shifting walkways, playing a high-stakes game of the floor is lava, where the lava is made of sentient slime. Navigation in Apocrypha is unique. You don't just walk from room to room, you travel through chapters. To progress, you must find a book on a pedestal, read it, and be warped to a different section of the level. This creates a disjointed, dreamlike progression. You might walk through a door and emerge on a ceiling, or read a book and find yourself on a lonely island surrounded by the ink sea. It is intentionally confusing, mirroring the madness that comes from knowing too much. The denizens of this realm are perfectly suited to the environment. You face the Seekers, floating Cthulhu-esque librarians who guard the tomes. They are annoying for two reasons. They turn invisible, and they summon clones. You swing your sword at a Seeker, only for it to vanish in a puff of smoke and reappear behind you, blasting you with a knowledge drain spell. Then there are the Lurkers. These are towering amphibious giants that rise from the slime pools. They stomp, they spit poison, and they have a stagger attack that can knock you off the platform and into the forbidden soup. Fighting a lurker on a narrow bridge made of books is a panic-inducing experience. But the true test of patience in Apocrypha is the prince himself. Hermaeus Mora is an unskippable presence. He appears as a mass of eyes and tentacles blocking your path or hovering over the final book, and he talks, slowly. This is a core in-game fact that every player feels in their bones. Hermaeus Mora speaks with a cadence that defies the passage of time. I am Hermaeus Mora. He draws out every syllable, pausing for effect while you stand there, unable to move, unable to skip the dialogue, just watching the subtitles crawl across the screen. You want the perk, you want to leave, but you're held hostage by a monologuing calamari. It is a masterclass in characterization. He is eternal, so why would he rush? But for a player with a bedtime, it is excruciating. The dungeon mechanics often involve the scry. These are organic-looking switches that you activate to extend bridges or open gates. The animation is unsettling, a flower-like eye opening to stare at you. Often, hitting a scry triggers a shift in the architecture. Corridors straighten, stairs unfold from flat surfaces, and the tunnel you just came from disappears. It creates a sense of claustrophobia despite the open sky. You are a rat in a maze that is constantly being redesigned by a mad architect. An obscure lore tidbit that adds a layer of horror to the realm involves the wandering ghosts. Occasionally, you will spot neutral NPCs wandering the stacks or cowering in corners. These are not enemies. They are the souls of mortals who sought knowledge and became trapped. They are obsessed, muttering to themselves about secrets and hidden truths. If you listen closely, some of them are recited lines from previous Elder Scrolls games, suggesting they have been here for eras. They are the cautionary tale. They are what happens if you stay too long. You aren't just fighting monsters, you are fighting the inevitable decay of your own mind. There is a significant community debate regarding the layout of Apocrypha. Is it infinite? The lore states it contains all knowledge that ever was and ever will be. In-game, it is a series of finite levels, but the skybox suggests a never-ending spiral of towers and books. Some fans theorize that the black books you find in Skyrim are just terminals accessing a singular infinite server. The Dragonborn is merely visiting a tiny partition of the hard drive. If you were to walk off the edge of the map and survive the slime, would you find another library, another seeker, or just the void? The climax of any Apocrypha visit is reaching the final black book. After navigating the shifting hallways, killing the lurkers, and enduring the slow-motion lecture from Mora, you reach the pedestal. You open the book, and a menu appears. This is the reward, a choice of 3 powerful passive abilities. These perks, like Secret of Arcana, Infinite Magicka for 30 seconds, or Black Market, Summon a Dremora Merchant, are incredibly strong. They are the carrot that justifies the stick. But the relief comes not from the power, but from the exit. You choose your perk, click on the book again, and the green world fades. You're spat back out into Solstheim, usually right where you left, the air smelling of ash instead of ozone. The contrast is grounding, you feel heavy, solid, real. Apocrypha is the ultimate never-again location because it is so alien. It demands a different kind of focus. You can't autopilot through it like a bandit camp. You have to watch your step, watch the walls, and listen to the slow, droning voice of fate. It is a dungeon that attacks your senses as much as your health bar, and with that, we have escaped the library. We have traversed the frozen peaks, the damp caves, the sinking cities, and the realms of madness. The controller is set down, the mouse hand relaxes, the quest log is, well, it's never empty, but the most annoying entries are cleared. The screen fades to black, the green swirl of Apocrypha dissolving into the soft, comforting darkness of your own room. We have walked a long road tonight, you and I, from the first snowy steps up the mountain to Bleak Falls Barrow, feeling the bite of the wind, to the humid, suffocating depths of the Blackreach caverns, where the glowing mushrooms stand like silent sentinels. We have fallen into the sightless pit and climbed the endless stairs of Forelhost. We have braved the stinging sand of the Soul Cairn and the blinding white of the forgotten Vale. These places, for all their frustration, for all the times they made us sigh and check the map, are now behind us. They are just memories, stories written in the code of a world that pauses when you do. The dragur have returned to their slumber in the niches of the stone walls. The Fulmer have retreated into the shadows of their chitin tents. Even Hermaeus Mora has closed his many eyes, returning to the silence of his infinite library. There is no more need to run, no more need to fight, no more need to search for that one missing lever in the dark. The inventory is sorted, the loot is safe. The Dragonborn has found a tavern, perhaps the Candlehearth Hall or the Sleeping Giant, and is sitting by the fire, listening to the crackle of the logs and the soft lute music of a bard in the corner. You are safe here, the walls of your room are solid, the air is still. The only sound is the rhythm of your own breathing, slow and steady. Let the tension drain from your shoulders. Let the fatigue of the journey settle into a heavy, warm comfort. The map is closed, the quest is done. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let the quiet take over. Sweet dreams.